How you doing, sir?
I'm pretty good. I am doing pretty good. We've got an excellent episode of the Photography Brothers coming here pretty soon to everybody. For me, a highly nostalgic episode, right? So, seeing as we're talking nostalgia, I was kind of wondering maybe just for some senseless chatter here to start the podcast, seeing as that's what we usually go for. I was wondering, Michael, what were some, and this is going to tie into the topic later, so it won't be as senseless as it appears, but yes. Michael, let me ask you something. What were some of the video games that you logged hours on as a kid? Maybe the game that you played the most.
Okay, so it's got to be a Super Nintendo game, and I'm going to say it is either Super Mario World 2 or the Flintstones game.
Really?
The Flintstones
game.
Fantastic. You want to talk about racing mechanics? Call of Duty, or not Call of Duty. These
Call of Duty Flintstones.
These Need for Speeds.
Right.
These Forces, you know what I mean? They got nothing on the boss battle races in Flintstones video game. Yeah, definitely a lot of nostalgia around those games, man.
Yeah, I'd say the games I logged the most on were definitely a lot of Star Wars related games. Star Wars Battlefront, Star Wars Pod Racer, like holy. Star Wars Pod Racer, like that was a game that I played a lot. Very fun game. The racing mechanics, your pod would get all smashed up, and then you'd have to like hold down the button, but that would like make you go slower and stuff. That was a phenomenal game. Obviously Counter-Strike. Shout out to Counter-Strike.
Oh yeah, man.
By far the game that I've logged the most hours on, and by far the game that I can kick like anybody's ass at Counter-Strike, bro. So, not really, because there's like competitive players and it's like an online game. So, you know, there's like ridiculous levels of competition with anything like that. But, you know, Counter-Strike I'm really good at. But I'll tell you guys one more game that I played a lot though, and Michael Costa will let us know if he got into this series as well. Again, one of the games that like don't even challenge me, or 2K for that matter, because like I can beat you at 2K as well. But Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, bro, I could play that stuff blindfolded. What about you, my man?
I played Pro Skater 2. I think I rented it from Blockbuster.
Fair.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a cool game. It was just, Pops, wouldn't take me to Blockbuster, rent it again. And, once that week long span had passed, my attention span as a little bugger, had raced, and I already wanted to buy something else or try something else. So it was fun though.
Stick with the series. Didn't stick with the series.
I didn't stick with it, unfortunately. Big regret of mine. But fun game.
Well, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 was definitely a highlight, and it was good as a game, because everything else was like just sheer violence. So I'm sure your parents were happy about that, where you're like, oh, a game where he's not just like shooting people in the face.
Yeah, they weren't a big fan of GTA.
That's nice. And when Guitar Hero came out, that was another chance to play a more expressive game. But speaking of expression, and speaking of guitar, and speaking of heroic acts, I've probably looped that intro music like at least 3 times by now. But we're gonna get Max. Max is gonna be getting really good at looping the music. All right, Max, cut that music. I've got an intro for everybody here. Here we go. Are you ready for this intro, Michael?
Never been more ready in my life, man.
All right,
let's do it.
I have to make sure that this cord isn't over my my frickin' wires here. What do you call them? Guitar wires? Strings. My guitar wires.
Guitar wires.
All right.
Okay.
That's a trademark. That's a trademark of the Photography Brother podcast. Look out for our new guitar wires coming soon to a guitar retailer near you. All right, Michael. All right, we're gonna have to get serious because this is a serious punk rock cultural song of the skateboarding people. Okay, so here we go.
Let's do it.
Tony Hawk Pro Skater for life. Hey, ho, let's go take some photos, brothers on the podcast. The kids are having a blast. Say it on the podcast, Photo Bros. Hey,
Wow,
how's that
look
one?
Look at this.
How is that one?
Nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Costa, he's over there. He's impressed by the intro. I'm Jared Poirier. I'm the other host of this podcast, your photography brother. We've got a great episode in store for everybody today. And Michael is feeling amped up after that intro. Aren't you, Michael?
So amped, man. So amped. That was a great intro. Legit. Probably the best intro.
The best one yet?
I think so, man.
Well,
I think so. It was great. I loved it.
We only started doing the custom intros like around episode, I don't know, maybe 10 or something like that.
Are you sure, man? I don't know. I feel like we've been doing them for, or you've been doing them for, I've done one. It wasn't very good. We've been doing them for a little while now.
Yeah, well, you'll have to get the guitar out pretty soon.
We'll have to get the guitar out. Yeah, I'll have to do something special, maybe a Linkin Park something. But
when
yeah,
we do sadness, when we do our episode on sadness photography, and you can bust out the Linkin Park. But today we are not covering sadness photography, Michael. Today we're covering a very happy and a very fun topic, very close to my heart, very personal topic to me. So researching the podcast this week was not in any way work. And if it was a labor of love. Michael, we were talking about Tony Hawk's Pro Scorer.
Yeah.
Tony Hawk's Pro Scorer. Everyone remembers that name. Not to
third party
not,
ripoff, actually.
Not to be confused with Pro Squirter. We all remember that game. We all remember that one. Tony Hawk classic. Michael also only played the second one.
I don't think Pro Squirter was made by Tony Hawk. I think it was made by somebody else with a similar name.
But
similar
Michael
name.
Costa?
No. The names are Tony Hawk, but oh, come on, you guys know where I'm going with. Anyways,
you can tell. Michael Costa will tell me after the program, ladies and gentlemen. But today we're talking about skateboarding and the history of photography and skateboarding and how those things are intertwined. And like I said, I have a real personal connection to skateboarding myself. My brother was a skateboarder. I grew up skateboarding, probably started when I was around 15 years old. I actually broke my collarbone skateboarding, and then I went back to skateboarding after that. I do mostly like vert skating, downhill, that type of style. But I did recently, only last year, learn how to like drop into a bowl and do that type of like half pipe BS. So yeah, and also my friend Tanner Tonkin, we're gonna be sure to link his Instagram down below. I'm gonna throw up a sick picture of Tanner skateboarding. One of my biggest inspirations to get into skating. He was in my art class, super gnarly skater, like went harder than anybody I know, actually like did dangerous stuff on a skateboard. And unfortunately he was in pretty hardcore fashion, was riding his motorcycle one time and unfortunately lost the use of his legs, but he doesn't care. He's got on his Instagram, like I think he tattooed on his legs, fuck legs. So keeping it real, keeping it skater. So shout out to Tanner Tonkin. And yeah, that was one of, just an example of how hardcore the skate community can be. Michael, do you have, and Tony Hawk Pro Skater, obviously, is my personal connection to skateboarding. Michael, do you have a personal connection to skateboarding?
So I think I was probably around 12 or 13 where, a friend of my sister's bought me a board, really close friend of the family and friend of my sister's. And so he knew I wanted to try it out. And he was trying to show me how to do an ollie, and he broke the board in half. So
Nice.
that's pretty much my relationship with skateboarding. Although recently, maybe within the last couple of years, I did buy a board at a garage sale, clearly prior to the pandemic. Just kind of strolling around, trying to get used to just balancing, but more so a recent side hobby, I guess, just trying to work up the confidence to do a bit more.
Oh, so you have a skateboard?
I have a skateboard. Yeah, it's not great.
Oh, nice.
I don't think.
Okay.
I don't know, but yeah.
Do you know what type of skateboard it is?
God, man, I don't know. Like I said, really just 4 or 5 times a year, just going down the street to grab something or whatever, just try and work on the balance and just going through the paces. But it's cool, man. I like it. I wanted to learn more.
Nice. I recently sold my penny board because I didn't need it anymore, but I still have my longboard and I still have my normal skateboard. So if we actually want to get out and do some skateboard photography, we're going to be able to do that, which is awesome because you kind of need to be able to, spoiler alert, we'll get into this later, but you sort of need to be able to skateboard in order to document skateboarding, as it turns out. So. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Before we get into all of that, I think that it's just time for a little bit of honesty here, Michael, on the podcast. So we're gonna get honest with the people before we start getting into some of the history of, as I said, skateboarding, photography, how these things have come together, how they're truly, intertwined. Obviously, skateboard photography wouldn't exist without skateboarding, but there's a pretty good argument to be made that without those photographers out there in the community, living day by day that lifestyle and documenting it, then skateboarding wouldn't have ever become what it is today, and maybe it just would have been a niche thing that 50 or so people did in California in the 70s, right? But we'll get into all of that type of stuff, kind of the history of skating, how it exploded, and the relationship to photography. But Michael, and here's where the honesty comes in, buddy. So when I brought up the idea of doing a podcast about skateboard photography, what was your take on that, Michael?
I wasn't stoked about it. I think I even messaged you and I was like, this is more of a you interest thing. But honestly, man, after watching, some of the content that you shared with me and absorbing some of that, and it was really interesting. I couldn't really stop myself from consuming all the resources you sent. So really excited to talk about this, man.
Yeah, and not even just the skateboarding, the tricks and whatnot, right? But just the sheer brilliance and the art, really, and just the knowledge of art theory and composition and all of these things, contrast and whatnot, and we'll get into all of that, right? But these photos aren't cool just because Tony Hawk's doing a 900, right? It's right. These are cool for a whole different reason. So I'm glad that you were able to kind of shift perspective on that a little bit, and I think that's fair. That's kind of the general opinion of skateboarding, right? It's not seen as a very accessible thing, I think. And it's kind of associated with a bunch of kids skipping school and doing drugs, right? Is kind of what people tend to associate skateboarding with, right? But it's not really. I mean, it is a little bit that, but it's not only that, right? Skateboarding is much more than that. It's a culture, a counterculture. It's a form of art, a form of expression, and there are so many things that are political about it, right? As well, skateboarding being a rejection of the old way of life, right? Coming out of the 60s and the 70s, a time of real social change, being we're gonna do this differently than our parents did it, and that type of approach, right? So I think that that's going to be very interesting to dig into. And then as well, you know, all of the things that are related to photography are related to photography. I'm really used to talking about photography, and we are, but we're talking about skateboarding. All the things that are related to skateboarding, you know, the music, the fashion, the tattoos, like visual art, all of these things, as well as photography. So we're going to talk about that stuff here in a minute. Does that all sound reasonable to you, Michael Costa?
Oh yeah, man, I'm excited. Let's do it. Let's dig in.
Okay, I'm gonna be doing a few things here. We're gonna talk about, as I said, some of the history of skateboarding, but we're gonna try to stick to photographers and you know, particularly analyze some of the work of some of the greatest skateboard photographers ever in history. If you guys hear me talking more than Michael, don't worry, I didn't even read the news story, so Michael's gonna be taking care of all of that news story stuff. Michael's gonna be telling me all about the news story today, and I might be taking the lead a little bit on this skateboard stuff. So with all of that said, we're gonna get into it here, and before we even do that, I do have to shout out an excellent series. Michael referenced it earlier. The main source of the research for this episode, I highly recommend that you guys go check out T. Hooper's series on skate photography, a 3-part series. Yeah. And in the last part of the series, she highlights a bunch of modern female skate photographers, and we're going to talk about some of them as well. And yeah, the other thing that I mentioned earlier is just that, like, why skate photography is so interesting. Like, one of the reasons why this was so attractive to me, especially once I started digging into this, I was like, man, this is so cool. Like, obviously the cultural aspect of it and just how different it is from like other sports, right? Like, we've covered different things, you know, sports photographers, their lifestyle, and the type of things that they go through. And like, to be honest, like, compared to a lot of the types of photography that you can do, like journalism, news photography, blah, 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 skateboard photography seems pretty freaking fun to be doing, and dangerous, it seems. But yeah. But definitely fun. And, you know, with the this whole skate culture thing and like punk rock and all of that, as I said before, it's like cultural insiders, right? People, like, if you're a skate photographer, like, you are close friends, like best friends with skateboarders. And it's like, that's pretty different from obviously things like the NBA, right? Where you talked about like literally LeBron James getting sued by photographers. Like, it probably doesn't happen as much in the skateboard scene, right? It's kind of a bit of a tight-knit thing, but I also think that there's a lot to learn from it in terms of art and photography in particular. So let's get into it here, Michael. One thing that was really kind of surprising to me, I guess, is how much, and it does make sense once you think about it a little bit, but just how much like film photography is a big part of skateboard photography, right? And I mean, for pretty obvious reasons, if we're talking about like the 70s, the 80s, I'm not exactly sure when the first DSLR came out, maybe the 90s. But even to this day, most professional, serious skateboard photographers are shooting on film. So that's something to think about. I think that it does make sense just because it's like more rugged, and it's also like analog, which so are skateboards, right? So I guess just like it kind of fits together. I was thinking, like, as I was prepping for this episode, kind of envisioning if I want to start doing some like skateboard photography, I'd be kind of scared to break my camera. So I guess that's one of the reasons why a film camera that's, you know, $300 or $500 instead of my camera, which is like $2,000 or $3,000 depending on the lens on it. You know what I mean? So yeah, definitely one thing that was interesting. A lot of film photography and a lot of black and white photography. Also a lot of wide angle and fisheye lenses being used predominantly. Most skateboard photography is shot with that like wide angle or fisheye, which I think works really well for a few reasons. It kind of emphasizes like the chaos and the adrenaline, right?
Yeah.
Of skateboarding. But I also like how it makes the skater like larger than life, right? Like you're busting out this huge trick, and the way that the fisheye lens works is that like you're looking huge and like you're taking up the frame and like so at the forefront, like so much larger than life, and then all of the people who are like watching you do it, right, are kind of like standing back there in awe, you know. So I just think it emphasizes like the freedom and everything of skateboarding, the fact that it's like maybe forcing you to look at like your normal life in a distorted way, right, instead of being like, yo, these like skateboarding bums on the street. It's like, what are you doing going to IKEA, right? Like, come on, like you should be out here skating. And just so we don't get lost in the weeds, Michael, of nerding out about cameras like we do sometimes, I'm just going to this coffee's starting to kick in.
I can see that.
When we started the podcast, Michael was like, "You're a little low energy today, man. I don't know. Like, I'm worried." Have no fear, Michael. Once I got the coffee in me and start talking about specific camera models. Oh boy, here we go. So here are some cameras that are used frequently in skateboard photography, kind of in no particular order, in a rough-ish chronological order. Hasselblad 500C, super classic film camera, the Pentax K1000, the Canon A1, and the Nikon F series. These are all film cameras. So as I said, film cameras, super important for skate photography. And with that, we can get into the history of skateboarding and the history of skate photography. So do you happen to know where skateboarding started, Michael, and when?
Europe.
No.
Yeah, it was in Europe.
Is it? I think of the United States, bro, as far as I could tell.
Okay, well, a lot of the there was definitely a large subculture, at least within Europe, and
there certainly was,
the UK.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't start there, but started in as far as I could tell from the documentaries there on YouTube and my own reading. It did spread to the UK, certainly Australia and stuff like that.
Yes.
1960s, like 1965 or so in the United States, particularly California, is where skateboarding was born out of like surfing culture. So there was like surfing before there was skateboarding, and I'm not particularly sure why skateboarding wasn't like enough for people. Why were they just like, I guess maybe it's like harder to find good. Yeah, I suppose that would be why, right? You can skateboard anytime that you want, but you have to like wait for particular weather conditions to surf. Maybe that's part of it, right? The availability of it. There was also this thing, the 76 and 77 Southern California drought. And this is one of the things that caused skating to explode in popularity. There's a drought and there's a bunch of people with pools. And because there's a drought, they don't have any ability to fill those pools with water. And this is when skateboarders like Tony Alva would be hopping over fences of people's backyards and like basically skateboarding until they called the cops. Or I guess maybe dealt with it themselves, but probably called the cops. So part of the history of skateboarding there, and part of the rebelliousness, I suppose, of skateboarding. So yeah, that's a big part of it. And that's when vert skating was actually invented in those pools during the drought in California. And that kind of leads us into the first photographer that I want to talk about. There's two actually that I want to talk about in this section here, as we're kind of transitioning from like surfing into skating. And those guys are Craig Stecyk and Glen Friedman. I think Michael Costa's more familiar and a little bit more inspired by the latter. So I'll talk about the first, and I'll let you talk about Friedman a little bit. So I mean, I'll let you. It's your podcast. You can do whatever you want. Feel free to interrupt me. I'm going to talk about Glen Friedman first. Okay, Michael, calm down. Let's talk about this. This is Craig Stecyk time, okay? So, Craig Stecyk in California started out documenting surfing, and then when these guys, the Z Boys, the Zephyr team, a team of like surfers who became skateboarders, they were like a bunch of kids from broken homes, and this was just kind of like a way for them to I don't know, to have something to do, right, and express themselves, skating in these bowls and whatnot. And yeah, Craig is a very good example of somebody like integrated into the skateboard scene, but also like documenting it. And his most famous work obviously is all around the Zephyr boys, Zephyr team, skateboarders here, and the documentary Dogtown and Z Boys, which he co-wrote, and like a bunch of his film and photography work is in there. So definitely a fundamental photographer to check out. And while I'm talking about that stuff, I hope that Max will roll some of Craig's photography. It's very, very kinetic, and really puts you in like the time and place of that. So yeah, I really like it. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, man. And for Glen Friedman, I'm sure you'll have a bit more to add to it. But one thing I love about his the portion that speaks to him and his work is how well it ties to the intro to the whole series. She mentions how, and even you mentioned earlier in this video, it's so much more than just getting a really nice trick. It's also capturing the culture, the movement. And certainly his work really reflects that. A lot of his work is focused on, capturing, the culture, and how it's tied back to punk and hip hop and elements of street culture. Really, really cool. It's a perspective that you don't necessarily immediately think to when you think skate photography. Again, like you mentioned, you're more so thinking of Tony Hawk doing some sort of triple axis backflip or something. I don't know, kick flip or something. But it's really cool to see work like his that more so kind of paints that picture.
Yeah, certainly. He's a very good example of that, of someone who's documenting, what it's like to live that lifestyle, right? What it's like to be a part of that scene. And it's not just going out to the skate park. It's like going to the punk shows and going to art shows and things like that. And all of the spaces associated with the businesses associated with skating, right? If that's like the venues that are hosting shows, and even early skate shops coming up, right? Because back in the day, you didn't have these like huge companies building skateboards. It was more like, just at first modifying surfboards and then later like building your own skateboards out of kind of whatever you had around. So yeah, very interesting to see the evolution. And Glen Friedman is a big part of that. Just so we don't take super long here, I think we should probably get into the next section here. I kind of broke everything down into sections just to structure things a little bit. This is going to be like the 80s and the 90s, so moving beyond the period where skateboarding was, predominantly an American thing. Like, you're right, yes, there was like a scene in Britain and things like that, right? And into Australia, but now we're getting into kind of, the more global reach of skateboarding, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. And oddly enough, we're going to start. See, it's like Michael Costa was really using his noggin and really using his foresight here. And we're going to talk about a British photographer, a very important photographer, for creating the Rad magazine. which is
Yes.
the Read and Destroy magazine, right? So Tim Leighton-Boyce, a British skateboarder and photographer. And this is, where we kind of need to emphasize, what we were talking about earlier, where without people there to document these things, right? Like, it's very important. Without these photographers and these videographers out there documenting, like, skateboarding could have gone away, right? Like, there's not a lot of people who are gonna like go and hang out at the, freaking skate park and like watch people skateboard, right? They're probably afraid of getting mugged. They don't want to be out there like smelling marijuana and watching people like sipping their 40s out the bag and stuff like that. So for people to see this stuff and get exposed to it, things really need to be documented. And early publications like Rad magazine, and then later other publications in the States like Thrasher and stuff like that. And of course, like even Tony Hawk Pro Skater, to bring it back, like just ways of bringing skateboarding to the masses and exposing other people to it and kind of bringing it beyond this niche thing, but also bring it beyond the limitations in terms of photography, right? Bring it beyond the limitations of just like documenting really cool tricks, and even beyond the limitations of like documenting the lifestyle and everything that we've talked about. Now we actually have some photographers to talk about that like are just phenomenal photographers in terms of technique, in terms of like artistic vision. They know exactly what they're like. These are just amazing photos that happen to have skateboarding in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about another guy, Skin Phillips. He's very famous, very well respected skateboard photographer, and one of the anomalies here, as I mentioned before, pretty much everybody is shooting wide or fisheye for skateboard photography, and his work is unique for using that 50 millimeter lens, like a classic portrait lens. And yeah, just some phenomenal work, man. And he's taking these photos, he's living the life, and he is developing them in his bathroom. He talks about like building a light room in his bathroom to like develop his own films and stuff like that, which is really interesting to think about. And yeah, I'll roll some of his photos here, man. But as I was saying, just spectacular photography work, like the composition, the leading lines, geometry, perspective, like the way that he's capturing these structures. It's not just about the, again, to go back to it, like keep rattling this home, but it's not just about the cool trick. It's about like the transcendence of someone who's like willing to risk their life because like they just want to, right? They just want to live like that. They just want to like do something like incredibly dangerous and gnarly because that's skating, right? That's the culture, and that's what makes them feel alive. And these photos are definitely bringing some of that out to me. Is there anybody else that was really standing out to you from any of these photographers of this period?
Yeah, 110%, man. And just to really add a word, or I guess a phrase to really sum up what you just came off of, like, it's that creative expression, right? And then, like, there's the different styles and things that really get that going for you. And for some of these individuals, and thankfully so, because their work is incredible, it's skate photography. And, to speak to a lot of the points that you just did around Skin Phillips, there's also Grant Brittain.
Yeah.
And
I don't know how to pronounce his name, but we're going to go with that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Brittain or Brittain or something along ththose lines. But
we'll say them both, and bases are covered.
Bases are covered. But oh my God, I mean, as far as the work that I had seen, throughout the series of videos and some of that research there, his was probably my favorite, and for a lot of the same reasons that you just referred to when talking to Skin Phillips. The compositions, his use of contrast to really make these individuals pop, but the conscious awareness of the surroundings and what he can and how he can compose those images. Like some of these are just unbelievable. The leading lines, all of that. He is,
and all black and white as well, right? All his
black
work
and
as
white
far
as
as I
well.
saw,
and it really pops, when you shoot black and white, you have to really, I think a lot of people like to just shoot photos in general and then like put them in black and white, and there's a vibe to that, and that's cool. But I think there's something about shooting it and being intentional with it, and he is so good, and I love his work. He's his photography first, like his, as far as composition and what he how he's framing it. It's almost like this would look incredible, and then is able to interpret where to place that skateboarder in the frame. He is just a very intellectual. I'm very inspired by this person, and I really want to look at more of his work as well.
For sure. You have to check out some of his inspiration as well. Very, very obvious that he's been influenced by this guy, Chinese photographer and videographer Feng Ho. So check out his stuff. The use of shadow and like very angular shadow and things like that, definitely reminiscent of some of Feng Ho's work. So another cool photographer to check out. We're actually in the period now where some of these people are on Instagram. So for the ones that are, I will link those down below. You might have a hard time finding, I don't know, Craig Stecyk, maybe. But he might be, I don't know. I don't want to say too old, Michael, but I don't know. I'll find out if I can find.
It might be some reposts or something.
Or maybe a fan account. But But Craig Stecyk, don't come after us if we're come and hit us with skateboards. Bunch of skateboarders just pull up on us. You're talking about Stecyk, weren't you?
Yeah. Oh man.
They drilled holes in them first, so they're more aerodynamic. They can hit us better.
Oh right. Yeah, that's smart. You've put thought into this. Clearly, I'm a little concerned, but
my skateboard gang that I'm starting, the Photography Brothers skateboard crew, we're gonna go around stealing cameras. No.
Wow.
So watch out for that. Coming soon to you. Now, if anyone gets their cameras stolen by skateboarders, they're going to blame us, Michael. You realize the PR nightmare.
Oh my God. For us. The
Photography
Board Brothers,
These are the Photography Board Brothers. These are hypothetical things. I might actually paint Photography Brothers on my skateboard. That would be pretty cool.
Ooh.
Would be good for the thumbnail. So if I do it, I'll put it in the thumbnail. But I should probably stop stalling because this is already going to be a long episode of the Photography Brothers. I want to get into the modern era here, Michael, and thank you for helping me out to get through some of this history. I honestly thought I was going to have to shoulder most of this skateboarding topic, but you had a lot of insights and a lot to say, and I can see that this crazy topic of skateboard photography has touched your heart. So that's amazing to see, right? And now we're going to get into the modern era, Michael. So people who definitely have Instagrams.
Or should. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk about a few female photographers here who are in the skate scene. The first one is Yuri Shibuya. Shibuya, Michael, which is what I say every time that our podcast gets a lot of plays. I go, Shibuya.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I'm sure that she'll appreciate that joke. And she is an American and Japanese individual, so documenting the scene of skating, both in the States, New York, and big cities in Japan, Tokyo. I'm assuming, I don't know for sure, but probably because that's a big city in Japan. Mm-hmm. And I learned that from watching Godzilla movies. The big thing here, when it comes to her work, what was really needs to be brought out is her use of artificial light, right? The use of like flash and stuff like that, and kind of the way that she's clearly thinking out scenes in advance, right? Kind of staging things a little bit, like where is the skateboarder going to be when I trigger this flash and take this photo? And, you know, with something as run and gun as skateboard photography, I mean, it used to be. Maybe this shows that it's evolving and modernizing, right? That, you know, these photographers now, luckily, in some ways, maybe unluckily in others, I'm not sure, but they're having more resources, right? There's big companies like Thrasher and stuff like that, and you know, all of these skate brands, DC Shoes, and you know, whatever other ones, Billabong, you know, all these Red Bull is like big time. Supreme is kind of skateboard related, yeah. That is true, you know. Globe. We can sit here all day, guys. Me and Michael, we know a lot of skate. There's one with a girl. I'm pretty sure it's called Girl. Anyways, but they're putting money into this, right? So now photographers are able to afford things like flashes, and they're able to do you know, bigger scenes and put a little bit more thought and a little bit more production behind some of these photos in a way that makes the photos obviously better. But you could say like it's a little bit less authentic or whatever. I don't know. I think better photos are better photos, I guess. So it's cool. So yeah, I'm really into that. And also goes to the point of how like studying skate photography, you know, as some people may be. Like, I'm not going to blame Michael here or you guys if you know, maybe you clicked on this episode and started listening to it, but you were a little bit apprehensive. Maybe you're a photographer yourself, but I think that there's a lot to learn about photography in general, as we've talked about here, right? Some of these people are just brilliant photographers, and I think one of the biggest things about skateboard photography, and something that Yuri Shibuya's work really highlights, is just like how the heck you plan out a scene, and how do you get good composition when something's coming through and moving like very quickly and very chaotically, and how are you like composing a scene, right? So this goes to so many types of photography, obviously photography of sports of any kind, but also wildlife photography, right? Like you got two lions fighting in front of you there and you're trying to compose a scene. Like, it's wild, man. So, you know, before you go out and shoot those lions, you know, maybe you shoot some skateboarders, right?
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think, you know, that's why, you know, we come into this show and we're almost always highlighting different types of photography, right? And, you know, we talked a little bit to it in the previous episode, but, you know, there's always things that you can be taken from a photo. You know, there's a reason why it's good. There's a reason why it's catching your eye and you're attracted to it visually. And, you know, we talked about it through Phillips, Grant Brittain. You know, we're continuing to talk about it through some of these other creatives. There are elements to their photography that make them stand out amongst the rest. And it's because it's just good practice, good creative vision, good, you know, we talk about it, leading lines, all this stuff. But there's a lot to learn. And if you're too narrow-minded and you only look at exactly, you know, that subcategory of photography that you're you know, primarily interested in capture, you might lose out on a lot of those key learnings or pick up on them later rather than sooner. So I think it's awesome that we're covering this topic.
That's why we do this podcast, Michael.
Yeah, man.
We don't want to leave anything overlooked, you know. And to not overlook the last photographer that I want to highlight here. Can you guess who it is?
Peggy Oki.
Oh, well, I mean, we definitely should have talked about her.
That's okay. I can touch on her in a minute. Go ahead. Go ahead. Do your part.
I mean, she's someone who we should have talked about like a long time ago. She's very early in the scene, but she's still very active, right? She was a member of the Zephyr Boys skate team that we talked about at the very beginning of the podcast. Anything else about her that you want to highlight, Michael?
I want to bring...
There's a quote.
There's a quote, yeah. So, I mean, I was hoping to bring it up at the end to tie it all together. But
okay, well, but then before we talk about that, we can talk about one. Let's talk about Zorah then first, okay? So we'll talk about Zorah Olivia. She is predominantly like a portrait photographer. Her portrait work is really good, but she also does some really stand out photography in the skateboard space. She does some digital work. Interesting here. Even the the person who, like, out of all of these photographers that I was looking into today, the only one who shoots like digital pretty much. And then they asked her in this interview, like, what would be like if you could only have one camera, and it's like a Hasselblad from like the 30s. She's like, give me that. I'm like, man, are we doing things wrong, Michael? Like, yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. But I really admire her work here, and we're going to definitely link her Instagram. So many of the things that we've talked about today are highlighted in her work. But it's interesting to see, because her work is so colorful, like high contrast, colorful, almost looks like a comic book. I'm very attracted to that style of photography, something that I like try to emulate as well. I'm just like, you know, some people like those more like desaturated, moody ports, and I'm into those, but I also like the vibrancy and the personality of her work. So definitely someone to highlight. And now Michael has a quote for you guys from legendary skate scenist Peggy Oki, who I forgot her name, but she's legendary.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it seemed like the list kind of just kept going when T Hopper was kind of going through all the different ways that she's relevant. I think my favorite soundbite, and Jared knows exactly where I'm going with this, was a quote that something that she said, when she was asked about, obviously being submerged in such a male-dominated, area, and it's something that I love because it's very relevant, of course, to her the status that the question was revolving around, but also in general. It was something in and around the lines of, don't look at the boundaries, look at the possibilities. And, it is really, in T Hopper, all credit, she does touch on this a little bit as well, but, we constantly get locked into the reasons why we can't do something.
Yeah.
Or why I don't
have the gear. I'm under lockdown. Like these different excuses we tell ourselves, right?
100%. But what we need to do is maybe just continue to like chime into that childlike almost instinct in the back of your head that's just really excited at to do something, and what that might lead to and what you can do, rather than the reasons why you might not be able to. And I think it's just such a great quote. That's like tattoo worthy as well. So if your buddy wants to tattoo something else on his body, I think that's a pretty good one.
Maybe not as good as his first one, but I but still pretty good. And yeah, definitely links back with a lot of the things that we've been discussing here, over these past weeks on the podcast, right? Like I'm thinking very strongly of the Somalian photographers that we discussed, right? Like if these girls in Somalia can get their hands on a camera and do some cool photography and put on a show of photography, bro, like you can do it, right? So despite whatever challenges you have, maybe you don't have that fanciest camera or whatever, maybe you're a girl trying to do something in a male dominated space, but you can always with hard work and dedication and passion, I think, surpass those things. Another thing that I want to highlight here, Sarah Hudson. She's another big skate scene girl, and she started this thing called YaGirlMedia.com, which helps to bring female skaters, female punk rockers, female skate photographers, whatever, related to the skate scene. So definitely someone that you should check out and support, YaGirlMedia.com. And yeah, Michael, I think that this was really eye-opening for me. To be honest, I just wanted to do this episode because I thought it would be fun. Because I really love skateboarding, and I can talk about skateboarding for a long time. As you guys can tell, we're at like, what are we here? About 50 minutes into the podcast. And we still haven't got to the news, so you can probably tell. But even I didn't expect to find, number one, like such quality photography. And like just in terms of like fundamentals and like the theory and practice of photography, like just some like literally like fine art here, which is not exactly what I was expecting. I expected some cool photos, but I got more way more out of this than I came here for. And yeah, man, skateboarding is something that's always been inspiring to me. It's a good way to get around. It's pretty convenient, but it's also a form of expression. It's a lifestyle. It's a place where people find community. It's a place where people find catharsis. It's a sport, it's exercise, it's all of these things, right? And personally, like after this podcast, I usually feel a real sense of fulfillment and peace, and I feel the same way after a good skate. So thanks to the listeners and the viewers for allowing us to cover this. And Michael, thank you for digging in here with me, buddy. This has been really, really fun.
Of course, man. And thanks for introducing the topic. Obviously, again, I was a little, I guess, in a sense, closed-minded in the beginning, but incredible content from T Hopper. Definitely go check out that content as well. She has tons of very good videos on there. And
I think it might be Hooper. It's either Hooper or Hopper, but again, we're going to cover our bases.
Yeah. Okay. We'll cover the bases. We'll see if my my grade 5 English has let me down or not. But but genuinely great content. I think a lot of learning has to do with how you consume it, right? Like that can be the difference between whether or not you're all in or like falling asleep in class. And you see that with teachers, and I think it's just as relevant with the type of video content you use to try and educate yourself a little bit further. And really good content. I can't speak highly enough about the content that she produces, and I'm very excited to dive in. So definitely go and check that out, and hopefully we can have her on the show at some point.
Heck yeah. Well, I don't know why I'm going to say heck. I don't know why I'm going to say heck yeah, because I already said the F word earlier. So
we're beyond that, Jared. We're beyond.
But I had to do it for Tanner. I had to do it for Tanner Tonkin, man. And something else that we're going to do for Tanner Tonkin, I guess, is get into the news.
All right, so today on the news stuffs, we got an interesting story coming in from yours truly, Petapixel. Well, not yours truly, I suppose, but I mean, we essentially work for them with the amount of exposure we give them. Petapixel, of course, again, we'll link it down below. But this article is covering essentially the lack of ethical manufacturing behind some of our beloved camera brands, and really just trying to reinforce us buying used. So very interesting article, getting to read through it. The ethical consumer is it's an alternative consumer organization. They're based out of the UK, and really what they do is they look at different sub-product categories, environment, people, animals, politics, product sustainability. Look at a few different industries, and they look at the companies that exist within them, the products that they're manufacturing, how they're manufacturing, how does it result, and they put together a score and ultimately determine how ethical that company is. And so very interesting. They did a study back in 2019. It was highlighted recently by, again, Petapixel, and they really just wanted to look at the different camera manufacturers and to see really how they kind of stood on all this, and not well. I'll say that. Thus why they're encouraging us to buy used. So they conduct these studies based on quite a few different credentials or criterias. My bad there, but really examining things like the toxic chemicals that's used during production. Materials used kind of encourage trophy hunting or hunting in general. There's quite a few things that kind of go into that. To name a few
how
more,
they're treating the workers and stuff, right?
Exactly, that as well. Of course, green consumerism as well. There's a lot of things that kind of go into that and accumulate up to a 20-point score. If you get 20, you're really perfect, and you should be considered a saint, I suppose. But
not a lot of 20s, I'm going to guess.
Not a lot of 20s, and I can tell you in the camera space, not very good. And so what I wanted to do is highlight a few of these companies, actually all of the companies, and just we'll look at how they've done based on the criteria that the good old folks at the Ethical Consumer have highlighted here. So when we look at number 1, this is the most. Can you guess, Jared? I think I may have told you by accident before the show, but can you remember who number 1 was? The most ethical brand.
Hasselblad. No. Let me see here. The most ethical. I'm gonna guess that it's our old friend Nikon.
Ooh, not a bad guess, because they are on the list. But it is actually Sigma.
Oh, right.
Sigma,
okay.
yeah. You got to remember, even the lenses themselves, they're part of that industry. And although
do they make bodies though, or just lenses?
I'm not sure about their full product portfolio. I know they're mainly lenses. I don't think they have bodies.
I've never heard of a Sigma body before, so maybe that's why I didn't guess it. But anyways,
I'd consider it because they make great lenses. But definitely on that lens side, not scoring very well, per se. Of course, they had the best score. It's still a failing grade if we go by, just referencing education growing up. It's below a 50%. So Sigma scored 9 out of 20. Just to quickly go through the rest of this list here, in sequential order from highest to lowest: Hasselblad, Pentax, and Ricoh tying at 7.5. Then you have Leica, GoPro, Nikon, Olympus, and Sony at 5.5 out of 20.
Okay.
Canon and Fuji, not too much better. Actually, not too far off. 4.5. Lumix at 4, and then Samsung, they must be doing just terrible things. They're at 3.5.
Wow, dude.
So there's a lot to, I guess, unravel there.
What is Samsung doing? Are they just like roaming the countryside and like slapping babies in the face? What are they doing? And like dumping a bunch of trash in the baby's carriage, like on top of the baby after they slap it. Like, this is terrible.
It's actually all of those things. Wow. They're not doing a lot of good apparently. Wow. With a score like 3.5 out of 20. Yeah. But ultimately what we're seeing is that everyone's not doing a great job.
Yeah, everyone's slapping babies. Yeah, it's terrible.
Everyone's at least flicking babies.
Yeah.
And so
at the best,
Sigma's out there. Yeah, Sigma's out there. Just excessively tickling babies. That sounds really bad, actually. Maybe that's why their score is below a 50%. I'm not too sure, but ultimately we need to do better. I guess not necessarily that me and Jared have any sort of say, but I think all of us do. With we vote with our money, and I think ultimately that's what they're kind of getting to here is buy used for now. Support the almost like recycling of these bodies and lenses, and that's certainly something that I know me and Jared do. We support. We're always looking, checking out the used market to see if we can get something that's essentially new and works well. Of course, sometimes you're gonna find something that's like, this camera has 500,000 shutter actuations and the viewfinder doesn't work. Don't buy that. But out of curiosity, Jared, what was the last thing that you bought used, camera related?
The last thing that I bought used was probably the lens that I'm using right now, my Canon 17 240, F4. Picked it up used, saved myself a little bit of money. I also have a Canon 50 millimeter. I think it's f2.4, something like that. That one I picked up used for a very cheap price, and it performs very well. And yeah, as Michael was saying, like there's certain situations where you might not want to buy used or might not be able to, but there is kind of this thing, and it drives a lot of the camera market, and let's be honest, it drives a lot of the content around cameras. And we've been obviously guilty of this ourselves. I mean, I'm not, maybe it's not really guilty. I mean, it's not that bad a thing, but there's a lot of talk about gear and upgrading your gear and the newest and the greatest gear. And you know what? You don't always need the newest and the greatest gear. In fact, as we were talking about here, like you might, if you want to do some skateboard photography or, travel photography or, mountain climbing, bear fighting photography.
Bear fighting. Yes. Very popular in Russia, actually.
Well, actually, our next episode is going to be all on bear photography. Nice. Not necessarily just fighting, bear kissing, hugging, bear sword fighting, where you have to sword fight with a bear, but the bear also has a sword. That's very popular.
Yes, they're classically trained. Yes,
in the Ukraine, actually.
Yes.
So we'll be talking about. We'll be talking to all of that. I totally forget what I was talking about.
I'm so victim of doing that too. Like I'll go on. But
I remember. Just like your gear and that not being the most important primary thing. And you know what? There's a lot of used. We're bringing it back up. There's a lot of used gear out there that's very effective and very useful. And people who are upgrading their cameras all the time. Like if people just ran out and got there are people that do that. Like every time a new camera comes up, they're like, yeah, let me go out and get that, right?
Yeah.
So they would buy the new Canon or the new Sony A9 or whatever. That's the expensive ass one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. As far as I know. Not always something that you need to be doing. And, there's a lot of opportunities out there to get some, pick up some used gear and maybe not contribute to some of the exploitation of workers here and some of the pollution that goes along with new cameras. So it's a good thing to highlight here, Michael. So I appreciate you bringing everyone's attention to that story.
Yeah, man, 110%. And again, it's one of those things. It's a vote with your dollars thing. For this story might resonate with more people, might resonate with not resonate with others. But if it is something, you're hearing about this, you're reading the article, however you're coming across this information, vote with your dollars, right? When you like something, you buy it. When you don't, you don't. It sends a message. And so if it's important to you, definitely there are things that you can do. You can share the article around. I'm sure there are forms of petitions or something along those lines. And, if there isn't, you can surely start your own. But, you certainly can go used, and you can support that used market as well. In general, you don't want waste for electronics. So, that's something that Jared talked about in his Earth Day video. I was honored to be on that show as well.
Could be both.
I was pleasured to be on it, man. Pleasured to be on it. But there's a part that we all play, and so definitely supporting that recycled market can definitely help. But be careful with the A7 III. Just be careful.
Yeah, be careful. Be careful. Do your research. But yeah, you can buy used and certainly get some good gear. And both Michael and I can we can preach about it because we practice it as well. So yeah, and something else that we practice and preach is wrapping up this podcast.
Yes, because this is one of the shorter shows we've had.
so short. It's almost like I didn't get obsessed at all.
Well, how are we gonna fill the time? I don't know.
We'll probably fill up the last bit of time here by talking about some other content that you can check out. Again, if you're watching this and you're like, man, this blue shirt guy, he needs to STFU, but this white shirt guy, he is like OMFG, right? So
Oh.
you're gonna, and if that's you, then you're gonna want to go check out the Michael Costa music channel. As I had Michael on my channel for the Earth Day video, I'm really hoping that he'll invite me to talk about music, because as you guys heard earlier, your brother Jared is a musical man. I mean, I can't say that I'm a virtuoso guitar player necessarily, but I can rock out a bit. So whenever Michael needs a little bit of extra rock in his life, hopefully he'll be hitting me up. You can also check out the Masha and the Dogs podcast, which is a podcast hosted by my beautiful girlfriend / fiance / dog mom, Masha Volokova. Check her out, Masha and the Dogs podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Something else you might want to do, Michael Costa, he's not just a podcaster, he's a newsletterer. And he's been putting work into the Photography Brothers newsletter. You can find a link below to sign up for that. Subscribe to this channel for more episodes of the Photography Brothers. You can also find us on Spotify and like Apple Podcasts and like Google Podcasts and Stitcher and all them podcast places. They probably have the podcast on places I don't even know about, right?
Yes.
So
yes, actually, we have purchased 3,600 pigeons that are currently flying around North America with those the Beats pills, those speakers. They got their legs, their claws, they're just clawed on. They're just flying. They're just beaming us across North America.
Playing it around. Wow.
Yeah.
Why just North America though? Why did we limit ourselves?
We start here, we expand, we conquer,
I see.
But we got to start here,
Yeah, so if you see one of those pigeons, make sure you give them a tip. And here's another tip. Come on back next week for another episode of the Photography Brothers podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you. We'll see you next week.
See you.